This episode is brought to you by Loom by Atlassian. Are you feeling stuck at work? Get your team unstuck with Loom video messaging and move work forward. Use Loom to simultaneously record both your screen and yourself to share a quick update, provide feedback, train a colleague, and everything in between. Plus, add Loom AI to your meetings for instant written notes and recordings. Try Loom today at Loom.com. That's LOOM.com.
This is the Long Island Report on 107.1 WLIR. Using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
This is the Long Island Report. This is Judge Richard Weinberg. Welcome back to our show. I'm with my esteemed colleague, co-host Jesse Garcia. Jesse is the vice chair of the state Republican Party, as well as the chair of the Suffolk County Republican Party. As we often say, as we prepare to do the show and Jesse and I exchange ideas about important topics to discuss, things change, and they change very, very quickly. So let me begin by the national one that's the big one. Then we'll go to the international. And by the way, we're going to be joined by Senator Bob Ortt, who's the minority leader of the New York State Senate here in the Republican Party. And Jesse will introduce him. He's a very distinguished state senator, as well as a medal winner for his participation in the Afghan war effort by the United States, a Bronze Star winner. But Jesse will begin the second segment with Senator Ortt. So, Jesse, this morning, the most amazing thing happened. Tish James, the Attorney General of the State of New York, announced that she's filing a lawsuit charging criminal fraud and false documents and bank fraud against the Trump organization, against Donald Trump, the former president of the United States, against each of his 3 children in connection with loans that were given either by banks or insurance companies. She claimed this was an outrageous fraud, one of the biggest frauds she's ever come across. The thing about this is, number one, it's a civil lawsuit, and the ongoing criminal investigation that she has a joint venture with the New York County District Attorney's Office, that's still ongoing. So people have said, well, Trump has been accused of crimes. Well, it's not really correct, because a criminal complaint or an indictment is an accusation of crime. This is a civil complaint, where the names of the alleged violations could be also criminal. That doesn't make it a crime. So let's be clear about this. This is merely, at this point, a civil suit, but that's not to dismiss the possibility that down the road that this will be a criminal prosecution as well by this joint venture of the New York County District Attorney and the State Attorney General. Now, my thoughts on this, Jesse, as a lawyer, is fundamentally they're saying they inflated the value of the properties in terms of putting an application for loans. And if you do a false filing, and if you're not accurate in this, technically you could have that. Trump has already responded by saying, look, all the loans were paid. Nobody lost a dime. No harm, no foul. What's the big deal? This is just a politicalization by the office of the State Attorney General, who ran on the platform of running as someone who's going to go after Donald Trump, that you would find the crime. Almost in a Stalinistic way, show me the man, I'll find the crime. So that's what this case is about. It makes all these allegations, but I don't know what the problem is, because in the real estate business, different people can have different valuations of property. And if there's any question, the banks and insurance company have the right to get their own independent auditors to do an evaluation. So with that introduction, Jesse, what do you say about that?
I appreciate that, and Your Honor. What I find this being is what you just pointed out, is that all the loans were paid, and why is a civil suit being there? But I want to tell you, if you think about it, we're 44 days away from election, and this is nothing more than a brazen publicity stunt on the part of a partisan, ineffective Democrat Attorney General here in the state of New York. She's ignoring true crime, like that of criminals day in and day out in our streets, and the true crimes that are going on, corruption, and places that should be taking investigation. Look at just the governor's mansion again. Governor Hochul Acting Governor Hochul has had these pay-for-play schemes. First, to come in with testing systems that the state overpaid for COVID, $300 million to an outside vendor that quickly donated money to her, and of course all the spending that's been moving forward on, like her involvement in the Buffalo Billions, her involvement in what was going on during the Cuomo corruption years, in the book scandal, everything that transpired in the nursing home scandal, and she's done nothing. She's remained silent. But we shouldn't be surprised. She ran on a platform for a liberal progressive socialist to indict Donald Trump. They are scared of him being placed back or him entering the political arena and what that means for their chances at the ballot box. And look at what's going on. We see in polls after polls, and more importantly, and disastrous for the people of New York, we see it in the mass exodus. August was the biggest single month where more people left New York for southern states than ever in the last 4 or 5 years. The biggest time. And that's because of our failed systems here of one-party rule and the failed abilities of our elected leaders here in Albany. She is symptomatic of the problems that's of Albany, the problems of one-party rule, and the problems of politicizing critical law enforcement offices like the Attorney General's office.
Well, Jesse, that's a lot to unwrap, and it's very well said. Look, I, as the House Democrats, I'm very upset by the weaponization of law enforcement entities, whether it be local sheriffs who are going after DeSantis on the border issue, where he moved people from Florida on to Martha's Vineyard, and all of a sudden some local sheriff, a Democrat, tries to make political hay out of that, says he's doing a criminal investigation of DeSantis. Good luck with that. If there's a criminal investigation on moving people around, somebody ought to wake up and see what the Biden administration has been doing with respect to 4.4 million people coming in illegally into this country, not holding them in a place where they can be processed properly, not testing them for COVID, not checking their backgrounds to see whether they're criminals, whether they're gang-related, cartel-related, whether they're terrorists. You want to talk about an abdication of responsibility. And if they're moving them around in the middle of the night and that's a crime, well, then the Biden administration's been doing that as well. So they got to be very careful about this loose talk. I'm not accusing the Biden administration of crime. I'm just pointing out this hypocrisy, this double standard that's going on, and this weaponization of law enforcement. And it's a terrible thing. And it goes up to the FBI, and we can talk about that during the course of the show. But the problem is that somebody has to stand back and say, doing politics is not a crime. You don't like somebody's politics or his ideology on the other side. Don't go looking for a crime to drive them out of office, to indict them, to prosecute them, and to convict them, when fundamentally all you're saying is, I hate your politics, I hate your ideology. That's what's been going on. And that's very destructive to this country, Jesse. What say you?
It is. It is destructive. And we've spoken about the divisiveness in this country. This is part and parcel of this problem, that they are weaponizing justice offices, the prosecution, for the purposes of stamping out political ideas, political thoughts, political persuasions, ideals that they don't agree with. That's wrong. That happens in third world countries. That happens in dictatorships, totalitarian states. That does not happen in the United States of America. But you know what? It happens here in New York, because the Democrats here in New York, whether you're in the Assembly, the Senate, the governor's mansion, or in any of the administrative offices like the Attorney General's office, they are scared. They are clinging to their last bastions of power. They want to maintain their status as elected officials so they can peddle their influence and peddle their power so they can ingratiate themselves with others. This is wrong, and this is a mistake. Now, I have a question for you, and I'm a layman when it comes to the law, but the fact that there's a joint criminal investigation with the Manhattan DA's office, and then this civil suit comes forward with the AG, who's a partner of the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. Is this some type of legal tool that you're trying to do to maybe try and get some additional discovery or get through depositions some language on the like a fishing expedition under the official guise of depositions that will help them in crossing up some people or some issues or confusing matters for the criminal investigation to move forward?
Well,
or does this mean the criminal investigation forward? Criminal investigation is done. It can't go anywhere, and they're trying to breathe life into it.
Well, I think that's you may not be a lawyer, but you understand the issues very, very well. The fact of the matter is they're clearly trying to use the civil lawsuit as a discovery device to try to build up a criminal case. There's no doubt about that, because then they'll have arguments about what are privileged documents, Fifth Amendment rights not to testify, all kinds of issues like that. Trump already said he wouldn't sit for depositions, in-house depositions by the state attorney general in her investigation. So clearly you have the weaponization of the civil complaint process, the civil lawsuit, as an attempt to go after Trump, one, and two, to bolster any kind of foregoing criminal case. So yes, that's what it's about, and it's shameful. But it's not. By the way, it's not unusual. It's not just in this case. A long time ago, when I was an assistant attorney general in the state of New York, at the same time I was doing criminal investigations under my powers, and I had in-house subpoena power as well as grand jury power. I would also be drafting civil complaints as well. So there's nothing unique about using the two things at the same time. A good judge, however, will slow down the civil investigative process and say, wait a minute, I want to be very concerned about you misusing this for a criminal prosecution. And so the judge can have a discovery calendar that could slow it down. But there's no rule that you have to, but the judge can use his or her discretion to do that. So I'm very unhappy about this result, because this does not do anything but weaken the United States from the inside. As we've talked about, Sun Tzu, the way you take out a country is you weaken it from the inside so the outside folks can come in and take you out. And by the way, if you don't think there's a real problem going on, let me point out two salient facts, and then Kevin's given us the song. We have to take our first break. But you and I have talked about how awful it is that China's buying up U.S. farmland in the United States.
Yes, we have.
And not only are they buying it up, but they're also destroying the productivity of that land. So it's not just that they're going to be farming there. They're making it not useful for growing food. Okay? That's a problem. Well, guess what I found out just this morning? Iran is buying millions of acres of land in Venezuela. Now, stop for a minute and think about the history, particularly your family's history, of Cuba trying to use a base in Latin America as a weapon against the United States. Why do you think Iran all of a sudden is interested in buying land in Venezuela? You have any strange ideas?
I absolutely don't. But this is the problem that we're having, is that it's almost like the Cuban Missile Crisis of like 50 years later. You have the axis of evil that you've described is surreptitiously positioning themselves in different parts of the Western Hemisphere, and they're getting closer. And in the case of China, they're buying territory and they're buying land right in our properties. Here
near military bases, Jason.
Near military bases. And here another one, we have people moving forward in Venezuela, another socialistic failed state that is hungry for cash, hungry for revenue, and will do anything, especially with someone after the billions of dollars the United States gave them under Obama and now Biden with this ill-fated Iran nuclear deal.
So let's think about this for a minute. They're buying up land in Venezuela, one of our enemies. They're going to be close to us in the Western Hemisphere, as you correctly point out. They're pushing for nuclear weaponry, which they could move over to Venezuela, right? And who's going to give them all the money? The idiots in the White House. Biden and his genius Kerry, the former Secretary of State, who's his energy czar, who thinks the most important thing in the world is, 500 years from now or 50,000 years from now, the degrees will go up 2 or 3 points. But right now, they're allowing this green energy secular religion to drive the agenda, and they're not looking at the world as it really is. Venezuela giving land to Iran, Iran going forward with its nuclear program, and Biden giving them money. That is a formula for the worst disaster in the world. Well, Kevin has just given me that circle that he gives. We're going to take a break. This is Judge Richard Weinberg with Jesse Garcia, the state vice chair of the Republican Party and the county chair of Suffolk County. We'll be back right after the break with Senator Bob Ortt, who is the minority leader of the state Senate. We're going to talk about some very important things going on in the state of New York and the future of our state. Please hold on. We'll be right back.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
It's the Long Island Report, using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia on 107.1 WLIR.
Welcome back. This is the Long Island Report. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. With me is my esteemed colleague and good friend, Jesse Garcia, the vice chair of the state Republican Party and the county chair of the Suffolk Republican Party. And Jesse and I are honored and privileged to have a very distinguished guest with us today, Senator Bob Ortt. Senator Ortt is the minority leader of the New York State Senate, which means he's a leader of the Republican Party. Jesse, why don't you introduce our guest and get the ball rolling?
Sure. Senator Ortt is a distinguished member of the Senate. He's a leader who has really energized the Senate conference here in the state of New York. We made gains with him under his leadership, and he's a veteran who has fought in Afghanistan and has been accredited for his work and his heroism. Mr. Leader, it's a pleasure for you to be here, and thank you. Maybe first up, we should just ask a quick question. The polls are showing that we're moving forward. You have great, outstanding candidates here on Long Island. In New York City, you're competitive, and you're making gains up in upstate New York. Tell the voters here who made a mistake in 2018 when they went Democrat and flipped the Senate to the Democrats in one-party rule. Tell them what a Republican Senate with a leader at the helm like yourself would look like, and how they will benefit from a Republican majority in the state Senate.
Well, first of all, Mr. Chairman, thank you for having me. Judge, thank you for having me. I appreciate certainly being with you. It's always great to talk to voters across New York, and certainly down in Long Island. I want to be very clear that this election cycle, Long Island, as Long Island goes, really so goes New York State. I firmly believe that we will have a good night on Long Island. We have a great slate of candidates. We have a great slate of members running for re-election, and certainly with the leadership of folks like yourself, Chairman Garcia, I know we're going to have a good night. And I think that bodes well for New York, because if we can't gain seats, we can't get back to the majority, as you sort of referenced, without doing well on Long Island. And I think what a majority looks like is, first of all, especially if you have a Republican governor, which is we're all hoping we have and we're all working towards with Lee Zeldin, you're going to have a repeal of cashless bail. So you're going to go back to the days where violent offenders go to jail instead of being returned, sort of catch and release. You're going to have less victims. We're going to tackle we're going to tackle the crime crisis that we see in New York City and across this state. Not only have Democrats, and it's important for voters to understand this, Long Island Democrats, New York City Democrats, on the big issues, especially on public safety, they have voted the same way. And I'm sorry to say that, but that's the fact. And so we need, if New York City Democrats want to continue not only to pass policies that have contributed to the increase in crime, but they also have no answers, no solutions to that crime crisis. And there's countless of examples you and I could talk about to drive the point home that we have a real problem right now with public safety, not only in our greatest city, but across the state. That's going to go away. You're going to see a return to public safety. You're going to return to law and order. You're also going to see a real focus on getting our economy back and bringing people back to the state of New York. We continue to drive people out of New York. Inflation, we know, is a problem across the country. But when you are a high tax, high cost state, when you talk about 8% inflation, that's going to have an even worse impact on places like New York State, where it's already very expensive to live. And all the Democrat policies would make that affordability issue even worse. You're going to see a conference like our conference. We'll work with the Republican governor to cut gas taxes, to cut regulations and costs on our small business so they can hire people. We'll be sure to pay down the unemployment insurance and the debt that we owe the federal government instead of passing that along to our employers and small business. You're going to see a conference that supports school choice. It supports the idea that, if you're in a failing school system, you don't have to send your kid there. And by the way, if you want to send your kid to a religious school, you can do that, unlike what Kathy Hochul's Department of Education ruled the other day. So it's a real alternative. Never before in recent memory has the difference between what the Republican Party stands for, especially here in New York, and what the Democratic Party has done the past several years. Never has it been more clear, and never have the voters had a more clear option that we can go in a different direction than the way we're going right now. So we're excited. I think voters are ready for a change. I think voters are ready for a correction. And with our great slate of candidates in Suffolk and in Nassau and across the state, I think you're going to see a very good result for our conference and for our party and for our state come November.
Senator, am I correct in saying that there are 63 members of the New York State Senate?
There are 63 senators, yes.
Okay, so there's 63 senators. So to have a majority, you need to have half plus one. Is that correct?
You need 32. 32 is the magic number.
Okay. So if you have the 32, and how many do you have now sitting as Republicans in the New York State Senate?
Today we have 20 members.
Okay. So that means you have to have what kind of change in November election to get the majority?
So we need a big night. There's no, I'm not going to sit here and pretend or sugarcoat it. We would need a big night. We need 12 net pickups. Now, keep in mind, in 2018, as the Chairman Garcia alluded to, 2018, the Democrats they flipped 8 seats in the Senate. And that's really kind of how we have gotten to where we are, is they had a record night back in 2018 for them. So we need a similar night this coming November. But I think the climate and the situation is laying itself out where we can have that. I think it's also important to know that the map, the lines, the Senate lines had changed. And the map that we got that was drawn by a court and a special master, an independent third-party redistricting expert who came in and drew these maps, according to independent analysis, there are 14 seats in this new map that are considered competitive, and 12 of those 14 are Democrat seats. So with 14 seats that are competitive, there is a path back to the majority for Republicans. We can go win enough of those competitive districts, and when it's competitive, the voter wins. Just like in the economy, in the private sector, when businesses are competing, the consumer wins. When there's more competition, the voter wins. And I think right now, the voter coming out in this election, New York State is on the wrong path. They are very concerned about what they see from a crime standpoint, from an economic standpoint. They don't know if they can continue to stay here. They can afford to stay here. And there's folks who, by the way, can't leave, but that doesn't mean that they're very wealthy. They might be here because they got kids in school, they got a sick parent, they have employees, whatever it might be. They cannot leave. They deserve a strong voice in Albany, and we intend to give it to them And I think we're going to make some significant gains this cycle. And if we don't get the outright majority this November, we can if we make significant gains, we have an opportunity then in 2024 and beyond, because this map is the map now for the next 10 years.
Well, Jesse and I have talked about this during the course of our shows. Both of us, Jesse is a Republican, me as a Democrat, both of us are absolutely opposed to having New York State as a one-party state. Our view is it's the most dangerous thing in the world. Going back to the founding fathers, it's perfectly clear that you want to avoid majority tyranny. And I submit most respectfully to the members of the Democratic Party that you have lost your way. You have a left-wing ideology, which is dangerous to the economy, to energy independence, to crime, to quality of life, to keeping productive people here in New York City, in New York State, and Long Island, and upstate. You have all of that. And that's all the result of one-party governance where they don't talk to anyone else. They just ram through whatever they want. And it's not based on reality. It's based on their ideology. It's all ideology-driven. And to do a quick history lesson for our audience, there was a time where the Republicans had the leadership of the state Senate because you had about, 5 or 6 state senators who were Democrats. Remember, there's something called the Independent Democratic Caucus, who worked with the Republicans to have moderate centrist governance. And I thought that was a great idea. And then one day, Andrew Cuomo, because he was afraid of being primaried on his left, sold out the Independent Democratic Conference, and all but one of them were wiped out. And that's what led to the majority of these Democrats. Now, what have you accomplished? You have Hochul in the Senate, your colleague, who's the majority leader. She's saying, show me the statistics about crime. Show me the statistics about crime. Read the newspapers, look at television, listen to the radio. It's out there. New York City is becoming a no man's land. It's the Wild West. And it's not just New York. It's all throughout the state. So we need countervailing forces. We need a strong second party in the state. What say you, Senator?
Well, first of all, your history is very much on point. I couldn't agree with you more. I think it is very important that right now there's a couple things I think I want to sort of unpack there. Not only do you have one-party rule, but in New York, with the one-party Democrat rule, what you end up with, the reality of what you have ended up with is you have a greater influence philosophically and just practically of New York City. Now, I don't know. I've learned a lot about Long Island. I'll never know as much as my friend Jesse Garcia or you, Judge. But I know one thing about Long Islanders. They're not New York City, and they don't want to be governed by New York City. And they want legislators who are going to stand up for Long Island residents. They want senators and representatives who are going to stand up for their values. And it is not the values of Brooklyn or the Bronx or certainly Manhattan. And again, the Long Island Democratic senators, if I were to put their voting sheet right next to the voting sheet from the most liberal member from New York City on most every major issue, you would not be able to tell the two apart. And I think that's a real cause for concern amongst Long Islanders. You talked about crime, public safety issue in New York City. It's also an issue, by the way, in the city of Rochester, which is not too far from where I live. Rochester per capita is more violent than Boston, than Chicago, cities with much larger populations. And yet Rochester has become really almost a hellscape when you talk about crime and public safety. Crimes happening in broad daylight, robberies, assaults, murders. And I think to your point, Judge, there's nothing to hold the Democrats accountable right now, whether they be from New York City or anywhere else. And they need that. There needs to be a reminder that this state belongs to the people, and that there is some sort of, as you put it, countervailing force, some sort of check on this one-party rule that really has led New York. When you have a governor of any state saying to the other party's nominating candidate and members of Congress, and by extension the people they represent, when she says get on a bus and leave, that is a dangerous and bad place to be in. You should never have a representative. And by the way, it isn't just her. Cuomo did the same thing. They do not believe that anybody with a center-right mentality has a place in New York State. And they've said that. They've told me that. I tend to take people at their word when they say things like that. And I think that should be a cause of alarm for a lot of New Yorkers. I have Democrat friends. You have Republican friends. The reality is this is America. We have a place. We have a right to be where we are. Many people are Republican, conservative. They consider New York their home, and they have a right to be here, and they have a right to have a voice in their government in Albany, not to be told to leave and go to Florida by the governor of the state of New York. And that's why I think she's unfit to continue to remain there. And that's why I think we have to provide a check on this arrogance and this hubris that you're seeing as a result of one-party rule.
I have to tell you, Senator and Jesse, my first job out of law school, I was a law clerk to a federal judge in Brooklyn, in the Eastern District of New York, in Brooklyn Heights. His name was Henry Bramwell. He was a black conservative Republican. He used to call me the Chamber's liberal. And I said, Judge, I'm not that liberal. He said, Richard, to me you are. and he is gone now. He was like a second father to me. But he would be absolutely outraged by the thought that if you didn't agree with the left-wing Democrats, you didn't have a right to stay in the state of New York. And if you didn't agree with the left-wing Democrats, then you had no right to call yourself black. He would have gone insane listening to that kind of ideological nonsense. Jesse, why don't you wrap up this segment with the Senator?
Sure, Senator. One of the things I want to talk to you about also is, Hochul and the Democrats, how they have, what is your message to them? You have fought them on the floor of the state Senate. You have fought them in the streets with ideas and new solutions and new ways, and they've ignored you. But certainly, they are aiding and abetting the destruction of the Empire State and America's greatest city. It's not safe anymore. You can't go on a subway. You can't go on a street. You just can't go out anymore with the crime being the way it is and everything being out of control. And now it's too expensive. Under their rule, criminals have more rights than victims, and mandates take precedence over liberties. What do you think about them being aiding and abetting the destruction of this great Empire State?
Well, I think it's really undeniable. If you think that New York, New York City, New York State, one of the great states of the Union. I mean, when you think of the United States of America, it is hard not to think of an image of New York City, of an image from New York State. It is one of those states that almost is synonymous with the country. I firmly believe that there are members, I'm not going to say all, because I'm not Kathy Hochul, but I will say there are members, colleagues of mine from across the aisle that have a disdain for all the things that you and I and others would hold up as what made the United States great. They don't think it made it great. They think it made it bad. And there's an antipathy. And so when we sort of shake our fists and, are like, how can they be doing this, the destruction of the empire? I think they're okay with it because they think it needed to be destroyed. They think it needed to be, there's a revolutionary aspect to their ideology, as the judge talked about. And it's hard to negotiate with someone like that. And many of them represent districts where the only person they're going to lose to is someone even from the further left in the city there. That's why the only check can come from Long Island, from the Hudson Valley, from upstate. Those are the voters who can make the check. New York City, many of those districts, the way they're drawn, these far left members from there, they're not going to lose if they even have an opponent. And if they do lose, they're going to lose to somebody who's an outright communist. So you have to be able to check them from Long Island, from other parts of New York State. But there's no question that they are, I think, almost okay. They would look at it as we're making necessary reforms. I would look at it, as you said, mandates over freedoms. If there's one thing on the ballot this coming November, it's the idea of, is New York going to remain a free state, a state that's run and governed by a citizen government, by citizen legislatures, that the citizens have a say in our government, or is it going to become a less free state, more controlled ever by the second floor, by the governor, and by one-party rule, which increasingly has a centralization of power down in New York City? That's really on the ballot for people this November, and I hope And I believe New Yorkers are going to choose freedom over mandates. They're going to choose law and order and public safety over, defund the police and chaos and crime. And they're going to choose hope and opportunity over being forced to leave and go somewhere else. So I really think that's what's on the ballot, and that's what all of our candidates down in Long Island, all the way to Western New York, I think are campaigning on and stand for.
Senator, that was absolutely wonderful. It's a great articulation of your party's position, your personal position, and most importantly of all, in my humble opinion, as the House Democrat, is the vision that people have to pay attention to, because this election may be the most decisive election of our lifetime to date. If we don't have two-party system, separation of checks and balances between the parties, and you don't have this unilateral decision-making by the far left in the Democratic Party, this state is in trouble. As Jesse pointed out earlier, 42,000 people have left in the month of August, the state of New York. And the question becomes, who are replacing them? And it's not necessarily the most entrepreneurial, the most productive, the taxpayers, the job holders, the people who serve and help others. It's people who are coming in here who may not have those talents, but we know who we are losing. We're losing the most productive, and that's very dangerous. Senator Jesse and I want to thank you very, very much for being on the Long Island Report. I want the record to be clear, by the way. I am a New York City person. I live in Manhattan. I'm a half a Long Islander. I live out in Suffolk on weekends. But your views should tell everybody, both in the city of New York and the state of New York, the right message to go out and vote in November and make sure that they vote to save this great state. Thanks again, Senator. We deeply appreciate it.
Judge, Jesse, thank you guys for having me.
It's the Long Island Report, using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia on 107.1 WLIR.
Welcome back. This is the Long Island Report. This is Judge Richard Weinberg. Along with me is my co-host and very good friend, Jesse Garcia. Chairman Garcia is the vice chair of the state Republican Party, as well as the county chair of the Suffolk County Republican Party. And Jesse and I are very privileged indeed to have State Senator Bob Ortt, the minority leader of the state Senate. He's the leader of the Republicans in that party, and a very bright, articulate, focused gentleman, a war hero, a Bronze Star winner, a true patriot. And he understands what we need to save this great city and this state. And believe me when I say to our listeners, this is a pivotal election in the future of this state and the survival of New York City and New York State. I'm not exaggerating. This is a big deal.
Your Honor, I think it's actually the survival of the middle-class American family, and middle-class taxpayers and middle-class families and middle-class business owners. I think that's what's at stake right here, is their viability in this state.
Oh, I think that's right, because the crazy left doesn't care how much they tax, how much they regulate, how much they destroy businesses who give the jobs and the services and the food and the supplies we need to live. They don't understand this. They put in these ridiculous green energy mandates, which are totally unrealistic, unworkable. Maybe you could do it if you had a calendar out 30 or 40 years, but right now we need all the energy we can get. We see the problems worldwide when people surrender their energy independence, and nobody has manifested that danger to Western civilization and Western Europe more than one Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, who did this aggressive war of adventurism against an independent sovereign nation. We're talking about the Ukraine. Jesse, what do you have to say about this?
I completely agree with you. And this week, Biden at the United Nations tried to scold Putin and chastise him for being a member of the Security Council and encouraging on the liberties and the freedoms of a sovereign nation as his neighbor. But his words ring hollow. The United States, NATO, the EU all had an opportunity to blunt this effort early on in the early days as Russia was mobilizing. and we did nothing.
We did worse.
nothing
Let me interrupt you by just reinforcing to our audience. We did worse than nothing because Biden, who doesn't control his own brain or his own mouth often, said, well, there wouldn't be two exercise if there was a minor incursion. Remember that? The minor incursion?
Right, a minor incursion. They say it's a slip of the tongue, but no, that's their mindset. You know, the true Russian collusion is a collusion between Obama, the Biden, and the Democrats, and Russia. That's the collusion, and it's through appeasement, and that's how it's going here. So his words ring hollow. If not by the bravery of the freedom fighters of Ukraine, who are now pushing back on this global power and showing the world that they're a paper tiger. The only thing that Putin can do is rattle the saber of nuclear exchanges, nuclear in Europe. This is the problem. That's why we have, and I've said this over and over again, and we had a great discussion last week about this. You know, the footprint of the United States influence on the global scale has shrank. It has shrunk to a point where we're not leading anymore. Let's give Donald Trump his due. He used direct, straight language and talk backed up by action when he went to the UN and he spoke with his allies or his foes, even his allies. He is the one who forced NATO through shame or whatever word you want to describe for them to meet their 2% contribution of their defense spending to NATO. He's the one who did that because the United States was fitting the bill for that for 20, 40 years. He's the one that did that. And fortunately for NATO, they had that done so that this was in place for them to protect themselves. But we were Biden, his words were hollow. He's allowing Russia to run this course, even now as they mobilize again. And our footprint as an American, as a superpower, is shrinking because of his inaction and his ineptness of this administration.
Well, look what Putin has done recently. He's used oil as a weapon and threatened to freeze out the Europeans for supporting the Ukraine. He has used food and grain as a weapon and fertilizer as a weapon to try to diminish their food stocks. So he can freeze them out, and if he can't freeze them out, he'll starve them out or some combination of both. Now, the Ukrainians, as you point out, are brave people, finally got some arms from the Western powers, including the United States, and they're fighting back and they're taking back territory. So what's Putin's response? One, he declares that he's going to annex the territories that he has under his wing now and make them part of Russia. And, of course, nothing stops him from saying not only the territory that he's lost that he's going to annex, but that which he had originally gained, which has been pushed back on. So he's saying it's going to be an annexation. Therefore, any attack by the Ukrainians against that, supported by NATO and the United States and the Western powers, will be an act of war against Russia. Catch that. He steals their property, then he says it's an act of war against Russia when the Ukrainians take it back with our help. Then he says he's going to mobilize 300,000 more troops to throw into this death march of killing all these young kids who don't know why they're there, have no idea what's going on. And he's going to throw tens of thousands of them down to their doom. Okay? And then he says he's increasing the criminal penalties, anybody who dissents against his war effort and criminalize any kind of dissent. He's doing that. And then he says, I'm being threatened by nuclear war. You're doing the nuclear sword against me, NATO. And remember, my nuclear weapons are better than your nuclear weapons, and they're stronger and more destructive. Anybody see NATO threatening nuclear war? The only one who's been making the sail rattling on nuclear war has been Putin. What say you, Jesse?
I think you hit it on the head. It's absolutely. He is unleashed. He's unhinged. And we need, as a global community, to rein this animal in, because that's all he is. And we also, though, need to stand up for ourselves. We don't need nations to sometimes step in and or play the hokey pokey, put one foot in and one foot out, like Germany did at one point or another. We need these nations to stand up because They're the first in line. But we can't stop there because once he begins, he's not going to stop. And you got to thank the people of Ukraine for pushing back on the Russian bear and making sure that they did not. This war was supposed to be over in a week, 10 days tops. Here we are now on the precipice of 6 months.
Well, he's letting out. Well, one of the things I read earlier today is not only is he mobilizing 300,000 reservists, but he's also letting out people from the prisons to go fight in the war.
Yes.
I mean, the man is absolutely a madman and a dangerous threat to world civilization. All right, Kevin's giving me that famous sign of his. He's both giving me the circle and he's pointing at me. This is Judge Richard Weinberg with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. We'll be right back for our final segment of the Long Island Report. Please hold on.
My cat Freddie loves to be brushed and cuddled. But stirring up his cat allergens meant sneezing and itchy eyes. Then I found Purina One Live Clear. It's cat food that reduced the major allergen and my suffering in as little as 21 days. Now, we feel closer than ever. If you have issues with cat allergens, you really need to try Purina One Live Clear.
Try new Purina One Live Clear today. Purina One, a difference from day one.
It's the Long Island Report, using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia on 107.1 WLIR.
This is the Long Island Report. We are back for the final segment of this week's show. With me is Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, the Vice Chair of the State Party, as well as the County Chair of Suffolk County, and I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. It's been a very interesting show so far, but more interesting topics to be discussed. There are three things that I want to raise with you, Jesse, and they're all interconnected. The first question, the large question, and we'll get through all of them, I hope, is can America be saved? And we want to talk about the threats from the inside and the outside. We need to talk about the threats from the outside, about the axis of evil, which is Russia, China, Iran, North Korea. I guess that we can probably add in Venezuela to that list now.
Yes,
okay.
We can.
And then something I think is very, very important because of threats from the inside, because people do not understand our history and what this country stands for. And so I'm suggesting that there will be required reading for all students in our schools and all immigrants of the great books that talk about tyranny, whether it comes from the left or the right, a respect for our Declaration of Independence, our U.S. Constitution. So let's begin, Jesse, with threats from the outside. What do you say?
I completely agree with you. And let's just take the global question first. Can America be saved? And it can be, because I have great belief in the American people. I have great belief in the people who, build America through its small businesses, through its schools, through its hospitals, the law enforcement. The spirit of America, the spirit of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence that runs deep with us in these 200 and some odd years that we've been around as the shining city on the hill. I believe that we can be saved. We can be saved from outside forces, and we can be saved more darkly from inside forces. And I think it was Abraham Lincoln who said that this country would be threatened more from within or collapse more from within than it would be from out. That's why I really appreciate what you have put down there about the required reading. I think that's something that we need to do. But speak about outside forces, because first, America needs to protect itself from tyranny and from national foes. There is an axis of evil that's building out there. It is putting its components together, and America needs to wake up. American leadership in Washington needs to wake up. It needs to take the woke system out of our military. It needs to take the woke system out of its diplomacy, and it needs to go back to the days of Teddy Roosevelt, when you carry a big stick to make sure that diplomacy, the use of diplomacy, it's peace through strength. It's a Russian proverb, but one that was placed into action by one of the greatest Republican or any president of the United States, in Ronald Reagan.
Absolutely. Ronald Reagan understood what you needed to be. As you point out in the earlier segment, we have to have a leadership role because we are the great hope of civilization. If the United States is not strong and not willing to confront evil and despotism, whether from the left or of the right, and we fought both of them. We fought the right-wing Nazis and the communists coming out of Russia, and won. If we don't understand that this is an existential threat, to use the term of art that's become very popular these days, there's no such thing as a stalemate in this. You have to be strong to defend our values and our territory and our people. And this axis of evil of Russia, of China, of Iran, North Korea, and we can't forget Cuba, and we can't forget Venezuela. These are countries that are dangerous to us because they're physically close to us. And in an age of technology, in an age of advanced weaponry, this is very dangerous. The idea, and we talked about it earlier, the idea that Iran is buying millions of acres of property from the Venezuelans. What do you think they're going to do with that, as I asked you before? They're going to put in military bases and maybe even nuclear arsenals against us. That's why Iran has to be stopped. And we can't keep saying, as John Kerry, one of the great doofuses of our time, said, well, this deal will stop the Iranians from getting nuclear weapons. It was never designed to do that. Read the deal. All it did was have a time period, and then they could do whatever they wanted to do. There was never a stop. And then Obama and Biden and Kerry gave them tens and tens and hundreds of billions of dollars. And what did they do with that? They gave them to the terrorist groups. They used them to organize against the United States, to threaten their neighbors in the Middle East and in Western world. I mean, how ridiculous is that, Jesse?
It is completely ridiculous. And that's why when we've spoken about the Iran deal and we're getting back into that deal, we know it was a mistake. It was a mistake to get into it during the Obama administration when Biden was part and parcel of this action. It's a mistake to get back into it now. Could you imagine that we're doubling down on $150 billion that we are releasing into the Iranian economy so that money can be used against American interests, American service men and women, and American and democracies like America and those in the Middle East.
That's awful. So let's focus our attention on the next question. So I had a required reading list that I said we should give to all new immigrants and to our American students because they really don't understand our history. They don't understand our institutions. That ignorance leads to utopian dreams and naivete to our external enemies and a lack of unity for our country. Read the Declaration of Independence. Understand what it stood for. It was an attempt by some of the greatest minds in the history of the world to try to create the best possible country with opportunity and freedom for all. Read the Constitution of the United States. It recognized the balance and separation of powers so you wouldn't have tyranny of the majority. Read George Orwell, who wrote 1984, An Animal Farm, about totalitarianism from the left. Read Aldous Huxley in Brave New World about authoritarianism and Stalinism from the left. Read Thomas Hobbes, Leviathan, who says that life can be nasty, brutish, and short, and it's the first obligation of government to protect its people. And when the left-wing Democrats say the enemy is law enforcement, the enemy is the police, the enemies have to be suppressed, that is, and defunded, and let the criminals out of jail, no matter how dangerous they are. Hobbes had it right hundreds and hundreds of years ago. The first obligation of government is to protect the people, and without protecting the people and fulfilling that obligation, they have no moral authority to govern. Read Abraham Lincoln, who talked about the danger of tyranny and the need to try to perfect this union and to always worry about authoritarian control and worried about divisiveness. These were great minds, these were great thinkers, and it's all over again. Every generation has to confront the fact that we cannot take our freedoms, our opportunities, our safety for granted. What say you, Jesse?
I cannot add. The only thing I would add to that, and I'm basing this on the essays I've read since we've interviewed him and his interview from last week, we should include Eric Levine in those readings. His essays are fantastic, and they would be great for students and immigrants. And let's not forget, we should always remember our history. we should add, as Andrew Garbarino, our congressman from Long Island, has suggested, urging schools and curriculums to teach, as part of history, the tragedy and the terrorist attacks of 9/11.
Absolutely. We talked about that last week. I want to have that as a national holiday, and I want it taught. And I'll also tell you that you have another very strong person running for Congress out on Long Island, Nick LaLota, who's running there. He's running for Zeldin's seat when Lee Zeldin's running for governor. And he's also a military man, a graduate of Annapolis, a strong defender of this country. These people understand the values that made America great and make us all safe and gives freedom not only to the people of this country, but worldwide. Because as Ronald Reagan, the greatest American president in my lifetime, knew, we are the beacon of opportunity and freedom for all people all over the world. This is the Long Island Report. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. With me is my esteemed colleague, good friend, Jesse Garcia, the vice chair of the state Republican Party and the chair of the Suffolk County Republican Party. Jesse, it's been another wonderful show. I want to thank you again, and I look forward to next week. Be well and be safe.
Pleasure.
Thank you.